Hello.
Hey, Duncan, how are you, mate?
Hello, I'm all right, thank you. You good?
Yeah, very well, thank you, very well. Hello, I'm Steve Joel, and welcome to my podcast, 40K Game Changers, in which we get to know the people who have changed the way we play or build or read or, today, paint Warhammer 40,000. So listen, the way I'm going to assume you haven't heard any of the episodes so far, but the way that it works is I'll do an intro, we'll do the big intro, and then we'll just chat about you for a while. And I promise to not ask you anything you don't know the answer to.
Okay.
And in case you haven't already worked it out from the show titles and his very familiar voice, my guest today is the amazing Duncan Rhodes. A little further along in this episode, I'm going to ask him a very direct question. This comes up so often on Facebook. What's the best brush?
The best brush?
Yeah. Yeah. Or do you not want to say?
That one's a piece of string.
This episode of 40K Game Changers is brought to you by the Frontline Gaming Network, home to some amazing content. A lot of it brand new as well. Make sure to download the all-new Signals from the Front Line with Seth, Shelby and Kicker. I'm loving this show at the moment. The whole week is covered with programs that preview and then review tournaments, shows that cover releases and have great guests. Val and Peter back with 40K Stat Center as well. All of it on the Frontline Gaming Network. Okay, you've waited long enough, so let's get on with this show. He was the face of Games Workshop from around 2013 until not very long ago. He quickly became best known for his painting videos and the catchphrase, too thin coats. When he confirmed the rumour that he was leaving GW, it basically broke the 40K internet, and in the time since, he's amassed 184,000 subscribers on his YouTube channel. He is, of course, Duncan Rhodes. Good morning. Thanks, mate, for joining us. How are you? Hello.
Hello, I'm very well, thank you. I'm very well. How are you?
Yeah, good. I'm excited about this. I want to say thank you, before we get started, thank you for helping me paint Magnus's wings and Dark Eldar skin and so many other things that I've called upon you for.
Oh, you're very welcome. Oh, yeah, Magnus was a good one. I enjoyed doing those wings with the dry brushing effects. But thank you for the lovely intro. That was very kind of you. I do have to say that I feel a little abashed. It's myself and my friend Roger. We're the ones working on it, so it's not really me that's made the channel of loads. I was working together.
Right. Fair enough.
So yeah, I'm always keen for people to know it's not just me. I don't want to steal all the glory.
No. Fair enough. And isn't that you actually come across as just this lovely guy who's doing something he enjoys? But we'll get to that. I just think it's an extraordinary resource when I can, all the way on the other side of the world, I'll go in and buy a miniature, and when I talk about painting it to the guys in the GW store here, they're amazing. And then one of the things they do is say, watch Duncan's video. Isn't that amazing that all the way over there you're doing these videos, and all the way over here you're teaching me to paint?
It's a very, very strange world, I think, that we find ourselves in these days.
Yeah. And the old timers in the hobby never had this resource to call on.
Yeah, well, back when I was starting out, there was nothing like this. You just had the little occasional guides in White Dwarf, and there was the little getting started booklet where it would show these 4 stages, and you look at the last stage and go, how on earth did you get there?
Yeah, that's right. It all seems so easy. So listen, you got into painting young. Your dad introduced you to Warhammer around 11 years old, is my understanding.
Well, my dad really introduced me to model aeroplanes when I was little, and he had model trains, and so I kind of grew up with model trains and things. So I always liked making kits and making models and airplanes and stuff. And I got into sci-fi through Star Wars. And one day we were in a model shop, and I was just looking for a new model kit, like a Spitfire or something. I don't know. But there was a little Warhammer display in the model shop, and this is just in a shop in the middle of nowhere in Derbyshire, and very small little quaint place. It was really nice. I used to love going places like that to explore and see what you could find.
Yeah.
But yeah, they had some Warhammer stuff, and they had the little free takeaway leaflets, which was what you got back in the second edition 40K box game of how to play. That explained, like some Space Marines versus some Gretchen, and they'd have at it. And I was like, these look amazing.
Yeah.
They look like a combination of Darth Vader and Stormtroopers, and those are awesome. So I want some of these. And my dad says that he thinks that there was a Games Workshop in Derby, and next weekend he took me there to go and investigate it. And yeah, he bought me a box of Space Marines and some black paint, some white paint, and a fine detail brush. And off I went.
The great fine detail brush. And was Dad
Yeah.
much of a painter? Was he able to sort of teach you the basics?
He sort of knew, like, the putting the paint on the model and not putting on too thickly and things. When it came to the nuance of it and stuff, he was only very passive, because back when we paint these model aeroplanes, it was just a case of putting on some grey paint and some green paint, and there we go.
Yeah.
But he and I used to look at the cabinet in the shop and wonder how on earth people got that detail in the models, because the Games Workshop Derby had some beautiful cabinets, and we'd look at these figures and be like, how do you do that? How have they painted the eyes on those Space Marines and things? And even like when I was working in the studio, I remember my dad would say, like, look in White Dwarf, and there'd be told me one time he went into a H. Smith, which is like a newspaper retailer kind of place, and you find them in train stations, and he'd see White Dwarf in the rack, and he'd have a look, and I'd be in it, and the models and stuff, and he'd be saying to me, I remember back when you were very little, and we were looking in the cabinets wondering how on earth to do it, and now you're painting this stuff and showing people how to. It's very strange to have kind of gone through the process. I don't think he thought of it as a real job until I started appearing in the magazine.
There must have been a lot of pride for him in seeing you, because seeing someone in print for a certain generation does make it real. It makes it legitimate. So he must have been really proud that you had got that far.
Yeah, I think so. I hope so.
Yeah.
I like to think so.
Yeah.
I know he's proud of making the step out into going my own way. Going with Roger to run this business.
Yeah.
He said to me back when I first told him that it was what I was thinking of doing. I thought we were like, ooh, you want to stay working with a company? But he was like, wow, I always wished I could try something like that. That sounds amazing.
Isn't that great? Isn't that great to have that support?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
So back in the day, the store that you mentioned in Derby, this was your first job, one of your first jobs. You actually ended up working in that store.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did. And actually, the guy who employed me was the guy who sold me those Space Marines back when I first went in.
Isn't that great?
Small world, eh? He still works the Games Workshop. He's an absolutely lovely guy.
Right.
I hope if he's listening to this, he knows who he is.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of my journey in the hobby is because of him being there. When I turned 18, I was looking for a summer job, and I had a placement in university to go and study archaeology. And I was looking for this summer job, and I went into Games Workshop, and I'd sort of lapsed a little bit, but I met Chris Peach there, and we had a game, and he was like, "Oh, you got the right sort of personality for doing this kind of thing. Have you thought about working here?" Like, oh, okay.
Wow.
I applied for the job, and I managed to get it. Whilst I wasn't that hot on the rules or anything like that, I was certainly really keen, and I just wanted to get involved and share this hobby with people. So I was very lucky to be around those people, I think.
What was your first army that you back in those days that you got into?
Oh, the very first one I did was Space Marines, of course.
Yeah.
And this was my own homebrew chapter, which we ended up doing a painting video for actually a few months ago. At the time, I called them the Imperial Skulls, because all my transfers, I had these skull symbols, and so I kind of used them on one shoulder and this lightning bolt symbol on the other. And it just started evolving over time. And these days I call them Void Knights, but I've not painted that colour scheme for an army for so long, not since I was 13 or so.
Right.
People keep telling me I should paint them now as a current rendition of them, but I've always got something else I have to do. So,
yeah.
But one day it'd be fun to do that.
Actually, I wanted to touch on that maybe later on, but you've brought it up, so I'll mention it now. That it's funny that there's this well-known phenomenon that a person who is a builder for a living often has jobs undone around the house. And I know a guy who's a plumber for a living, and he just doesn't ever get around to fixing his own shower. Is that the same for you, that you paint for a living, these models? Do you have unpainted? Do you have a pile of shame at home?
Oh, yeah. Oh, good Lord, yeah. So many things. I feel horrifically guilty about it, but because I'm exposed to all these models all the time, there's so many things that catch my interest, and I'm a real, hobby butterfly, I guess you'd call it. I keep sort of flittering from one project to the other, and things have grabbed my interest. I'm like, oh yeah, that's really cool, and I'll be painting that thing, and something else is like shiny off in the corner. I have to fight not to get drawn onto that other thing.
Yeah.
I've got lots of half-finished and unfinished things. I've got lots of finished projects, certainly.
Of course, sure.
And they get kind of boxed away, but there's so many other things that the mountain is huge, and there's a lot of things. At home
It's nice to know though that you have the same thing that the rest of us have. That the new shiny thing, you go and get it and you want it, but there's still unfinished stuff at home. But there must be days. There must be days where you get home from work and the last thing you want to do is pick up a paintbrush again.
Oh, yeah, that definitely happens, but not as often as you might think,
right.
Just because I really enjoy it. And I'm always careful to make sure that what I do for my stuff is different to what we're doing from work. And there's occasional things where it's like unusual coincidences, which I suppose actually has happened now. Last week we did a video on doing the Africa Corps. And it just so happens that some friends and I started dipping our toe into Flames of War.
Right.
And one of them really wanted to do Italians in Northern Africa. So I was like, oh, okay, the other one wants to do British. Okay, I'll do Germans. So I just so happened to be painting, but even Africa Corps for myself at the same time as the Academy. But it's a different scale, so there's still a difference there.
Yeah.
And I always find having that separation helps keep it fresh for me.
Yeah.
I suppose that's why it sort of justifies me to keep fluttering from one thing to another, because I want to enjoy myself and I don't want it to feel like a punishment or anything.
Of course.
But you can very easily just encounter so we've got a forum on our site, and there's a group on there who are doing we're all challenging each other to paint a new thing for the end of lockdown. So I'm doing these Flames of War models for that. And there's one guy on there who's new to the site, and he's like, oh yeah, I'm working on some Scottish Covenanters, which, if you're not aware, are the Scots during the English Civil War. And I was like, oh yeah, I started doing an English Civil War thing. No, those are some really nice miniatures and Perry miniatures. Oh, I could dig out those guys with handguns and start painting those again. Before you know it, it's not even a new thing, but it's still distracting me. I'm like, oh yeah, that'd be really fun to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm terrible for it.
Isn't it? Well, it's kind of it's strangely reassuring to know, and it's funny that you bring up Peachy right at the start of your working at Games Workshop, like just in the store. You already had an association with Peachy at that point.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he was. I actually did meet him before he knew who I was. He doesn't really remember it, but I was kind of getting back into the hobby, and I was going to get some Chaos Space Marines. And I was looking through the codex that they had on the shelf, trying to work out which Legion I was going to paint. And I'd heard of the Word Bearers back from the old Chaos Gate video game. I was like, oh yeah, I could do Word Bearers. They'd be pretty cool. And I had a chat with him. And at the time, he had a goatee and all this sort of stuff. And I was like, oh, I was thinking of Word Bearers. And he didn't know who they were. And then all the stuff started gathering around the book going. And they weren't in the book, weirdly. And we were like, none of them knew who the Word Bearers were. And then so many months later, I came back in the store and I had this army painted. And yeah, we had a game of his Imperial Guard against my Word Bearers.
Wow.
We had a great time. We really hit it off. We really did. And so he's always been a presence for me. It's quite weird that most of my friends I've met through Games Workshop in one way or another. And, even though I don't work there anymore, I still have connections to these people.
Of course.
They're wonderful people. They really are. Peachy is absolutely one of the best people I know.
So let's go back to how you I know you sort of went away from Games Workshop and did other stuff, and then how you got back into working at HQ.
Well, I was working in retail, and I ended up leaving because it was kind of all right, you got to grow up, Duncan, go and get a real job. Okay. So I ended up working in an office, and I was doing administration tasks and things. It was like this office where they were selling like gas control, central heating controllers and things like that. And weirdly, I'm pretty sure I sent one of the control units to Games Workshop because it's on the wall in where the miniature studio is now. I remember seeing that on the wall and thinking, I've probably posted this here. Yeah. That was weird. But I was working there for a while, but it wasn't very fulfilling, even though it paid better. And then Peachy, meanwhile, he'd gone from working as the manager in Games Workshop Derby, he'd gone to working in Warhammer World, then got a job in the studio with what they call the hobby team, and they were about painting armies and things for various different purposes in publications and things. And he got in touch with me saying, oh, they're looking for another person. I think you'd fit this role really well. So I applied for it, not really expecting much of it, but I managed to get it. And I mean, on the they have all the applicants in on a kind of interview day, and they give you challenges and things. And one of the painting challenges, I really didn't do very well on it, but apparently I did quite well with the actual interview with the boss. So They gave me a shot, and I managed to do it. So yeah, but I suddenly found myself working in HQ, seeing all the unreleased stuff, being like, goggle-eyed, looking at all these things, like, oh.
Yeah, that must have been like a little bit of a pinch yourself, because I feel even I'm a much older man, but even the idea of working at Games Workshop just seems so cool. It would be a cool thing.
Yeah, it's a very bizarre thing. I mean, eventually it becomes a job. You do have to approach it, and you have good days and you have bad days. But it is a real luxury to be able to work with something that you're interested in, because I know lots of people who work in all sorts of different fields and things. And a common thing is that they do the job for the money, and it's soulless to them. And I kind of always thought to myself, it must be, it must be really lucky for me to be able to go to work, and the thing I'm spending my time on, even if it's on a thing I'm not so interested in, at least it's in the field I'm interested in.
Yeah.
And it's a real joy to be able to do that thing. So it's easy to forget it when you're doing it every day. But yeah, it's a cool place. And what was really nice as well was to meet these people who I'd known through the magazine and stuff over the years. And you kind of quickly realise that they don't like people being starstruck when going to meet them. Dave Andrews, for example, who sculpted lots of miniatures when I was growing up and things, and would do lots of projects and things. Meeting him, because he was working in my department, he was such an example of the kind of person I wanted to be. So calm and rational and thoughtful and creative and all these things. So that was wonderful. Ali Morrison as well. He's hilarious. He was wonderful to meet, and get on with him. And meeting the Perry twins as well. I was dead shy about meeting the Perrys because I loved all their miniatures.
Yeah, the Perry twins are so sort of iconic in terms of what Rick Priestley was one of the people we talked to, as part of the series. And he's a lovely guy, and he talked about the Perry twins. Weirdly, also, I think he went to study archaeology or something similar. He was that was his university geek. He went off to study archaeology. Anyway, so you're at Games Workshop and you're working on things like White Dwarf and various projects, and there's a small team of you doing this. I heard a story that you got the TV gig when that came along, partly because you were able to jump at the chance, but also partly because of your clean, slender fingers. Is that true?
Yeah. Kind of a few things came together for that. So when I was doing the hobby team stuff, and even back in retail, my favourite part was always kind of trying to make the hobby accessible to people and show them how to paint things. So I really enjoyed doing the guides, and I was very fixated on my guides about being as honest as possible with the stages as to how it should look, and not trying to embellish anything to show off or anything like that. I wanted it all to be very honest.
Right.
So the TV thing kind of was a step up for actually showing how to do it. So I went for it because I had that in mind of like, oh yeah, okay, so that means I can actually show in motion the thing that I want to show rather than just being a still photo, and that's surely going to be a better explanation for how to do it. But I didn't ask to do it. I was asked to do it. It was the lady who did our schedules and stuff came around and inquired, we're looking for someone to do this. Would you be willing? And it turns out it was because my schedule was more free and flexible than anyone else's at the time. But also I was told as well that apparently someone had looked, and out of everyone I had the prettiest fingers. Because I don't bite my nails or anything like that. Right. So apparently that was another reason, though how true that is, I don't know. Well, but yeah, the reason I heard was because of my schedule being free.
Yeah, and it's the fingers were important because at that time, with the way the filming was done, and I suppose still now, we see more of your face now, but at the time it was very much just focused very tightly in on the fingers and the paintbrush and the model.
Yeah, got to look after your fingernails.
Yeah, that's right. And when it all started, though, like when the TV opportunity came along, at that time, I really want people to remember that G-Dub was in a different space in terms of the relationship with the community. It's very easy now to see there's this great sort of responsive relationship. There's a lot of Facebook. There's a lot of G-Dub community. Communication with the audience, I guess. But at the time, it wasn't really like that. So was it a little bit scary or daunting, kind of stepping into that space, given the environment?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was terrifying. So I'm quite a sensitive guy. I'm actually quite introverted. So going on a big public stage is a very unnatural thing for me to do. So I was quite worried about. Not necessarily about being taken to and like people like as weirdly what's happened. Like I wasn't concerned about would that sort of thing go on. I was concerned about would people hate me, because there was a lot of negativity towards Games Workshop because the perception was Games Workshop didn't want to talk to the people who were buying the miniatures. Right. Now that wasn't necessarily true. It's just that I don't think it was really fully understood at that point how best to handle social media, because you got to remember social media is still a relatively new thing and people are still adapting to it now. So back then. It was all very, very new and very wild. So at the time, the company was trying not to have any kind of celebrity appearance with anything. So even the novels wouldn't have the author written in them. But then it comes along to me, and because of the way that Roger wanted to shoot this, to give the impression that it's like an approachable, friendly guy who's going to show you how to do everything, to kind of associate a face to it, he fought for getting my name on it because he was arguing that without a name to this face, it's not fair on the face. Firstly, it's also weird because who is this guy who's telling you things? Like, you need to understand. So at the time, for I don't know, maybe 2 years, my name was the only thing that Games Workshop put out there, which was weird. So yeah, I was very scared of the fact that I'd then become the focus of everyone's ire towards Games Workshop. And as it turns out, it was the complete opposite is what happened, because it was taken as Games Workshop's now talking to people and showing them how to do stuff, and helping them enjoy their hobby. So, thank God for that.
Yeah.
Because if it had gone the other way, I don't know how I would have handled it.
Yeah. Do you know what? It's funny, though. A lot of people and I'm very similar. Like, my job is very, public facing, and I've got my face on billboards and the backs of a bus around town. Mm-hmm. But I'm exactly the same. Like, if someone came up to me and said, I hate what you do, I'd probably shut myself in my room for a week. There's a lot of people in the medium who would say we are introverts, which surprises folks, I think.
Yeah, I imagine you find the same. It can get exhausting being a public face, and every now and then you just have to kind of retreat and hide from everybody.
100%, yeah. But you would never want to. It feels like you're complaining about something that you shouldn't when you say those things out loud, because people often say about the job, and you say, well, look, it's something I've always wanted to do and I love it, and it beats digging ditches. Like, it beats actually working for a living. But there are definitely days where you go, yeah, you know what, I just want to stay here and not go out anywhere. But
it's a very, very odd thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But now I want to ask about Roger, because you mentioned him right at the start. He's part of the project that you're doing now, but he's been there all along. Who is Roger?
Okay, so Roger is the TV crew guy who, back when the TV studio was setting up, was, I believe, the very first employee of it. So this is kind of like way before Warhammer Community. It all sort of grew out of TV, I think is fair to say. And he was always like pushing for it. And even when he applied for the job, because he was a lapsed, he'd studied video editing and things back when he was in university. But this was quite a long time ago. This was in South Africa too, because he's South African. So the technology's moved on quite a bit. So he had to relearn loads of things to be able to do it. But what he did, what got him noticing when he was doing his application, is that he was focused on what we want to do with this is to show people the miniatures and how cool they are. And that's what it's all about. So there's no like fancy dramatic things about it. It was all about, I want to show these miniatures. I want to show how people paint them. I want to show them how you game with them and things like that. So he got his shot in through that. And so then he was always pushing for, well, we can do painting videos. This is a great medium to show it. And then I come along also going, I just want to show how to paint the miniature. And so the two of us fit really well together, and it became a bit of a passion project between the two of us. And then it just, because it was such a small, there was only 3 of us in the department when I joined, and it'd been going for a year or 2 at that point as well. Yeah, so he trained me with all the presentation stuff. He coached me through it. He gave me homework to do to get better at it. He's introduced me to the concept of all these different camera angles that he'd want, so that he can have shots that gives him. So when I'm doing my part, there's active shots I'm aware of that I'm trying to give him the option. So when he does the edit, he can edit it together, taking these various different shots. So it's a bit like driving a car, of managing all these things at once. But he went through the whole process of training me all these different things, all these skills and stuff. And the actual way the videos ended up looking was through a long process of us working together on it and kind of honing it. So none of the shots are by accident. They're all like deliberately designed for particular things.
Yeah.
So he's had a huge impact on it behind the scenes, but because he was behind the camera, no one was aware he was there. So I was always feeling really guilty of people coming to me and going, "Oh, Duncan, that latest painting video is amazing." And I'm like, "Oh, thanks very much. Here's Roger. He's hugely responsible for it."
Yeah. Oh, it's great that you're so willing to share the credit. And again, it speaks a lot about who you are. When you guys first started doing this, and yes, there was a bit of trepidation and there was a bit of, on your part, a little bit of concern. It must have been wonderful then to see the reaction that you got, this hugely positive reaction to the videos you were doing, and then what came from that in terms of Warhammer Community.
Yeah, well, Warhammer Community kind of started through a team were doing it, and it kind of grew into the TV thing, and it all sort of combined together, and then more and more things got plugged into it. And yeah, they just started pushing my name on it, and it always kind of amused me that they were doing that. I'd stay sort of unaware of it and just doing my job. Everyone around me would be kind of aware of it. And so I'd hear it trickle through that and become more aware of how it was going in hindsight. But yeah, at the time, I mean, when we first put up the first few videos, I wasn't allowed to look on the internet as to what people were saying about it. But I think Roger was doing, and then I gradually got told, yeah, you can go and check it out. And I think people were checking to make sure people were being nice about it.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't go and walk into, a pit of doom or anything. But yeah, it just sort of like grew and grew and grew. And I just carry on doing my job day in, day out, doing these videos and things, explaining how to do things. And it didn't really hit home until people started recognizing me in public. And I'd start hearing stories about what it helped them do and achieve in their hobby. And then when we started getting sent to these shows and things, when Warhammer Fest started, and all of a sudden I had people asking for me to sign things for them and stuff, I was like, what on earth is going on? This is very strange.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm fascinated by the whole cult of celebrity thing within Warhammer, because you're very famous within Warhammer circles.
Yes.
I don't know if you get recognised in the supermarket necessarily, but you certainly do at conventions. It would be difficult to go to a tournament as a player. Have you ever tried that sort of thing?
Yeah, I have been to tournaments and things. So when I was still working at Games Workshop, I went to a Lord of the Rings tournament along with one of the guys who works in the photography department at Games Workshop and a photography studio. And yeah, we joined in and we won the best painted thing. And that was really awkward. Man, I really don't like being in painting competitions because I was like, oh, I'm a bit uncomfortable with this. I'd rather not be in it. But the guy I was with, it was, it was a huge deal because I was like, oh, we're up for an award.
Yeah.
But I suddenly realized that everyone was looking at me going, well, of course he's going to win it. And then I was like, if we win, they're all going to roll their eyes. If we lose, it's going to be a thing.
Yeah.
And so I just sort of quietly have been trying to retreat from painting competitions ever since.
Yeah, it's kind of a no-win situation for you. That's a tricky spot to be in. Yeah.
Yeah, and it happened last year. I kind of forgot about it, but I went to I got these guys in Stirling in Scotland. Then they saw that I was into playing Ice and Fire from Cool Mini or Not, and they invited me to this tournament. So I went along, and yeah, they had a painting competition, and then it suddenly struck me of, oh no.
Yeah, that's right. Do you have any funny fan stories? Have you ever had people bowl up to you in the street in like a place where you just didn't expect it, or unusual things go on?
Yeah. Well, like you say, being recognised in supermarkets, that has happened. Usually, people are very polite about it, and I'll go and talk to them for one reason or another. So there was I was looking for directions. I was in Chesterfield. I was looking for directions to where I was supposed to be meeting my girlfriend, and I went into the shop. I can't remember what supermarket it was, but it was like a little place. And there was a counter next to the entryway. And I went in and went, hello, could you direct me to this thing? And he's like, oh, yeah, sure. I was like, oh, thanks very much. You're welcome, Duncan. I'm sorry. He's like, oh, yeah, you're the guy in the videos. And so I had a chat with him. The funniest one was, so my girlfriend and I were over in Poland. And we were on our way to what they call the milk bars, which are like a little breakfast bars that are kind of a leftover element of back when it was communism there. So it's like cheap little kind of place where you go in the morning to get breakfast, and it's it's very, very Polish. It's very like a part of the culture. So yeah, like, let's go and try some of that. So she's taking me to one of these places to show me what they're like and things. And we're walking past a tram stop with a tram there, and this guy gets off the tram and he suddenly bumps into us and he goes, "Oh my god!" And he was like, "You're Duncan." Like, hello, yes I am. Like, I've just been reading my Necron Codex.
Oh my god!
And,
that's so
yeah,
good.
so he's on his way to university and he's reading his Necron Codex. He gets off the tram and walks into me.
Isn't
so
that
I was
funny?
like, oh, wicked.
Yeah.
Yeah,
In
we had a chat
Poland,
about his
like
army.
it'd be the last thing you'd expect. And I guess that's the thing with That's the thing with you. Like, you can go anywhere in the world, and if there are Warhammer people there, they will know you because you're the guy. Do your videos get translated into other languages, or do you have subtitles in other countries? Or
Oh no, we've not mastered the subtitle thing yet. It's a lot of work to do subtitles and to do transcriptions. It's easy to think, it doesn't take very long, but because of the fact that I'm talking in a very conversational way and occasionally use slang and things, translating it into another language doesn't necessarily fit. So whilst there's auto translation things on YouTube, what we'd have to do is get to the point where we can hire someone to do transcriptions and things. And it's a big cost to be able to start doing that sort of stuff.
Sure.
Not yet, unfortunately, but
Yeah.
hopefully one day we'll be able to do something like that.
Yeah, I'm talking to you like, and you're answering the question as though you're still at GW, which is obviously not the case. But so let's talk about that leaving, that step of leaving. You've decided that you want to go and start your own thing. That must have, again, that's another scary kind of quite daunting decision to make, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, when the idea first did come up, like I was saying, I mentioned to my parents and, talking to family about it, like, what do you think of this idea? And I was surprised how positive everyone was for it, because like in my mind, staying in the safe of the company would be a smarter thing. But so Roger, for a long, long time, has had a dream about wanting to run his own business, and he's often talked to me about it over the 10 years or so we've been working together. And we started thinking to ourselves, could we do this kind of stuff as an independent thing? Because we were becoming aware of how far-reaching it had got. And it was like through these shows and things. And we started thinking, could we take our ability on this and start applying it to other things? Could we do it for ourselves? And we got to the point where we sort of realized where, well, if we don't do it, then we'll always wonder if we could have done it. And it might fail, but we can, hold our heads high and say, at least we tried. So yeah, we plucked up our courage and went for it. And thank God it's worked.
Yeah, it really has. Were you surprised by the reaction from fans? When you first said, I think there was a Twitter post where you kind of came out and said, look, there are rumours, and I just want to let you know that, yes, they're true, I am leaving. And it just went. Like the number of, the reaction was amazing, really. It was amazingly supportive, I think, just looking through the comments. Twitter doesn't always do that, by the way, but it really was a supportive environment for you at that time, it felt like.
It sure was. Because I saw that some rumours were going around about it, and some people were starting to argue. Like someone was saying, I've heard this, other people were starting to call them names and things, and I was like, oh, I don't want to have this sort of negativity happening around my name. So, I'd handed my notice in. I worked a month's worth of notice, and I think there was a sort of general idea of keep it quiet, but I just didn't feel ready to go and see what might happen when I announced it. So I sort of kept it quiet. But when that started happening, my boss phoned up and was like, this is happening. You can say if you want to. So, okay. So I just posted that, I've seen there's rumours going around, and yes, I am going, with the intent being, please stop arguing about it. And then it just suddenly exploded into this huge thread of people saying stuff. I was quite overwhelmed, quite moved, really, about how many people were talking to me about it. And I guess at that point, I knew that I wanted to go and try something. And as soon as the new year started, as soon as I was technically unemployed, Roger and I started actually working on things.
Yeah.
So I knew I was going to build something, but those 3 months or so were quite a scary period, because success kind of relied upon the fact that people already knew who I was and what sort of stuff we do, and getting people to be aware that Roger's there too, and it's the two of us together doing it.
Yeah.
So it was a bit of a hair-raising time.
Yeah, I bet it was. Yeah. You know what's interesting though is that it's funny talking to someone like you because you are a nice guy. Then being a nice guy on camera is just the easiest thing in the world, and it doesn't seem like a very big deal to you. But you've been on camera as this just genuinely nice, helpful person for so long, and also part of I got into the Games Workshop. I got into Warhammer 40k just at the very end of 7th edition. So all I've known really is this wonderful, responsive community. Nick Bainton and those guys just really being amazing as part of the community team. So, when you announce you're leaving, it's just no surprise to me that people are like, oh, they just like you. They want you to succeed. For you, it might be a surprise, but for us on the other side, when you said you were leaving, we were like, okay, how can we make this work for this guy? We like him. We want to be helpful here.
It means more than I could put into words, really. It's that people took me to their heart in such a way is an incredibly valuable thing, I think. And it was quite moving. It really was. I just suddenly saw all this outpouring of things, and it's like, man, I just want to show people how to paint their toys. That's really all I'm trying to do. But I can see how, like, the logical part of my brain can see how this is all like formed and attached and stuff. But it's like it's not what my driving intent was to end up like that. So it really was quite an incredible, and still is quite an incredible thing, the fact that this can work. But it's always been like a real I've always felt really happy about when I've seen people saying that they met me and that I was exactly who I was on camera, and I was still friendly and chatty and things like that. And or at a show, they'd come and talk to me and say, he looked exhausted, but he still stopped and talked to me, and we had a nice chat about this sort of thing. And like that, I find really meaningful because, I don't want to, like the person I am on camera, it is me. And Roger was always very keen as well that that's what we want to get across, because you've got this friendly personality. That's what we want people to feel when they're interacting with what we're doing. So I've always been lucky in that way, I suppose, that I can just be myself. But it is nice, and it's nice when people pick up on that when I actually meet them.
I think these days people can spot a fake as well. You can tell when someone's intent is not what they say it is, and I think being as genuine as you are with the intent to help, but also we understand that you've started a business, so there's that side of it as well.
We've got to make a living.
Yeah, you've got to make a living. Interestingly, one of the first videos I watched, it might have been even one of the first ones you did for the Duncan Rhodes Painting Academy on YouTube. I couldn't quite get over it. It shocked me because you talked about using an army painter brush, and it was so weird to see you like saying, "I'm going to use this brush from Army Painter because I like the way it does this and that." Was that a strange thing for you as well, to suddenly have this whole world of recommending other products open up to you?
Yeah, it was. It was suddenly strange when I had to start thinking to myself, I should introduce the brand of paint I'm using. It amused me watching the reactions people had to it, because I've always been aware of all these different products and things. Obviously, when I was doing things for work, I'd use the products that the company was selling because it's common sense, right? So it's using Games Workshop products and things. But suddenly being able to use all these different things and different games as well. So it was funny when we did the what was it? It was the Stormtrooper for Star Wars Legion. And see people going, he knows that Star Wars Legion. Well, of course I do.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But we're so used to seeing you say, all you say is a fine detail brush, or you get your whatever. And then suddenly saying Army Painter. And weirdly, I think at that time I had also recently spoken to Adam Abramowicz from Army Painter. And so and I'd been kind of talking to him, and I thought, maybe I should try. And then you weirdly, just out of the blue, go, I'm going to use this Army Painter brush. And I went, well, if it's good enough for Duncan, then I'm going to climb on board with that as well. But there's a responsibility there too, isn't there? Because there will be people who go, well, if Duncan's using that, then I'll use it too. So you've got to...
it's very odd. People have been... they beat for beat will collect all the paints that we use specifically in a video, which is quite an odd thing to suddenly realise, because we thought that people would just use whatever's close in their collection. But no, they want to use exactly what I'm using. Yeah. So, I'm suddenly like, well, I don't want to go and recommend any Duff products or anything. So I'm going to make sure that what I'm using is, what I'm actually using. And I'm not endorsing it as such, but sort of at the same time, I guess I kind of am. Yeah.
Well, look, while I've got you then, since you know what you're talking about, this comes up so often on Facebook. What's the best brush?
The best brush?
Yeah. Or do you not want to say?
That one's a piece of string. I think the one I've ended up using the most recently would be one of Army Painter's regiment brushes, which it's worth noting that, so in case with any brush, when you go and buy them, even brushes in the same size type will have variations on the bristles. It's just a part of the brush making process. So it's always worth, if you're going to buy a brush, if you can do it in person, because you can actually look at the brush and pick the one that suits you. So I got a slightly smaller than average regiment brush, which I think there's actually something like off with its construction. So in the ferrule, where it meets the actual handle, there's like one or two bristles sticking out of it, which is kind of weird. So it looks a bit like the Ugly Duckling, but it's the most incredible brush I've ever used. So we nicknamed it Excalibur, and it holds a point like nothing else.
Wow.
And this brush I can use to paint entire miniatures, from the base coats to painting the eyes. And I'm talking about like actual eyes, with eyeballs and stuff. It holds that good a point throughout. So that's probably the one that I find the most useful all-purpose. But that said, there's, depending on what you're doing, there's going to be a different one which is best for it.
Yeah. Do the companies like Army Painter or Citadel or Vallejo, I don't want to just focus on Army Painter, but there's a lot of them, right, that make paints and brushes and whatever. Do those companies ever come to people like you and say, hey, look, how can we make the product better, or do you have any advice, or do they seek feedback from professionals? Army
Painter do talk to us, certainly. Vallejo we haven't spoken to. But yeah, they if you have problems with the product or anything like that, or if you do have feedback for it, then yes, you can certainly say, I've had these issues and stuff. And we found as well with multiple companies and miniatures and things like that, when my name's on it, it seems to carry weight, I guess.
Yeah.
Even though, again, feels really odd. But it means that it's the kind of thing where if you do think there's a thing, you can help do something about it, I suppose. But they're always open to, and wanting to make their product better. And they're all good for different things too. And as you're using the different ones, you find that the paints, someone who's used Games Workshop ones for a while with Citadel, but you'll know that the paints, even the same type, like 2 base paints, they won't behave in quite the same way, because to get different colours, you have different chemical formulas in each of them.
Yeah.
And when you go to different manufacturers, you find that expands even more. So you start to find particular paints work best for particular things. So it's really interesting, expanding horizons and seeing what different things.
Yeah, it is interesting. And you even see feedback from people about this. So in one brand, the colour red will be too runny or won't work, but in another brand it's great. Or the colour green for a separate brand is perfect, but then other greens don't work. It's just you kind of have to find your own way with it a little bit, don't you? But I don't mean to sound like I'm throwing my weight around with that, by the way. No, please don't think that's what I think. I guess the reason I was asking is because it seems like the responsible thing to do if you're a company making something, to go and ask the people who are using it all the time, the professionals, what do you think, and get some feedback, not throwing weight around, but just getting feedback. The other thing that's interesting that you brought up, if you put your name on something, it's a bit like the Jamie Oliver cookware. So you'd have to be really careful about that, because again, being a genuine person who cares about the end result, you don't want to be putting your name on something and then find out, well, maybe it's not as great as you thought it was.
Oh, absolutely. If I end up giving, if I was associated with something that turned out to be like not up to standard, or like caused bad results, things like that, I'd feel awful. Yeah, I really would. Yeah.
So you've got to be. People don't. We have to understand that for you to make that decision, or just to say out loud that you like using something on a video, that bears with great power comes great responsibility. I don't know.
Well, yeah. I just hope that it's nice that people trust the advice and things I'm giving, but it's always done for a particular reason.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for example, with Vallejo paints, we'll use them when we're painting World War II stuff, because we can say, well, because Vallejo is very good at getting the specific colour for that specific thing. And when it comes to historical things, people like having that specific colour correctly.
Right.
So, it's nice to be able to say, like, well, we're using this paint and stuff, and to know that, we've thought about it. There's a specific reason why we're using this one, so we recommend it. But that said, if you want to vary it, there's lots of other options out there.
Sure. So. Well, listen, I feel like I've taken up enough of your evening, and I really appreciate your time. It's lovely to be able to chat to you, and for people listening to the podcast to understand that you are just who you seem to be in the videos.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. It's it's nice to be able to talk and things like this, and it sometimes kind of inspires a bit of self-reflection on things.
Yeah.
But I'm always really touched about how the community supports this quite bizarre job that I have, and allow me to feed myself, and for taking to Roger as well, since he's kind of like come in front of the camera a bit more. It really is a wonderful community and a wonderful hobby, and I'm just really happy that I'm able to help people enjoy it.
Well, I would love for you to, if there are days when you go in and you don't feel like picking up a paintbrush and doing it, or if there are ever times where you wonder if it's making any difference to anyone, just remember that all the way on the other side of the world, you taught me to paint Magnus's wings, and you taught me to paint Dark Eldar flesh. And I love what you do, and I really appreciate it. And it's wonderful to have you out there showing us how this stuff works.
Oh, thank you very much.
And that's it. Listen, thank you so much to Duncan Rhodes for his time. The Duncan Rhodes Painting Academy is on YouTube. Also, you can check him out at duncanrhodes.com. I've put a link in the show notes to this episode. If you enjoyed the chat with Duncan, please consider listening to the first series of shows. It's all at 40kgamechangers.com, which features guests like Lawrence Baker and Mike Brandt and Jim Vessel and the Tabletop Titans guys, among many, many others. And don't forget Signals from the Frontline at the Frontline Gaming Network. You're going to love Seth, Shelby and Kicker. Until next time, I'm Steve Joel. Thanks so much for listening. This has been 40K Game Changers.